Welcome back to the Retro Chat podcast. My name is Andy Evans, and we're coming to you live from Weymouth, right here in Dorset. Coming up this week on the show, we're going to be going back in time to look at one of the, let's have a look at what it is we're talking about today. So this week on the show, we're going to be talking about WCW Mayhem that took place in 1999, and it was billed as the Night of Champions. Much before the WWE did the Night of Champions pay-per-view, WCW tried to do the same thing. Now, before we get into that good stuff, how can you get in contact with me right here on the show? Well, you can subscribe on Instagram and Facebook and Twitch at Retro Chat Podcast. You can tweet us directly at Retro Chat Pod, and you can listen to the audio on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, TuneIn, and everywhere else. Right, let's have a look at WCW Mayhem, which took place on November the 21st of 1999. Mayhem was the first professional wrestling pay-per-view event produced by WCW under that banner. Now, they only did two, one in 99 and one in 2000, and then the company went under. The game was presented by Electronic Arts, in which the event was named after, because they had just done the video game WCW Mayhem. And it took place from the Air Canada Centre in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. There were 12 matches on this card. The most notable feature being the culmination of the 32-man tournament for the now vacated WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The title had been vacated because previous champion Sting attacked the referee at October's Halloween Havoc, and Goldberg defeated Sting for the title in an unsanctioned match. The first 3 rounds of the tournament took place on WCW television, and the semi-final and finals were contested at Mayhem, where Canadian crippler Chris Benoit defeated Jeff Jarrett, and the Hitman Bret Hart defeated Sting in the semi-final rounds. Hart then would go on to beat Benoit in the main event to win the championship. A clip of the match appeared in the opening credits of the TV series Malcolm in the Middle. Didn't know that. Now, the card featured professional wrestling matches that resulted from, as we know, scripted storylines, and they were played out on Nitro, Thunder, Saturday Night, and Worldwide. So we've already spoken about the title being vacated, but at Halloween Havoc, Sting defeated Hulk Hogan to retain the World Heavyweight Championship after Hogan on purpose laid down for Sting. Later that night, Sting would then issue an open challenge to an opponent for a true wrestling challenge, and this was answered by Goldberg, who had earlier in that night defeated Sid Vicious for the United States Heavyweight Championship. Goldberg defeated Sting in the unsanctioned match to win the title. After the match concluded, Sting attacked Charles Robinson, Little Nate, the referee, with a Scorpion Death Drop. And the following night, Sting complained to JJ that he never put the title on the line in the match. Dillon stripped Goldberg of the title and vacated it due to Sting's attack on Robinson, which in turn would set up the 32-man tournament for the vacant WCW Championship. Bret the Hitman Hart defeated Goldberg in the first round to win Goldberg's US Heavyweight Championship with interference by Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, or the Outsiders. And on the November 8th Nitro, Scott Hall defeated Hart, Goldberg, and Sid Vicious in a fatal 4-way ladder match to win the United States Heavyweight title. On the November 11th episode of Thunder, Disco Inferno provided guest commentary during Evan Courageous' match against La Charoux and began flirting with Courageous' valet Medusa. Now that caused some distraction to Courageous. He lost the match, and after the match, the Disco Inferno challenged Evan Courageous to a match and offered to put his Cruiserweight Championship on the line, and Courageous accepted the challenge. On October the 25th Nitro, the powers that be gave an ultimatum to Kurt Hennig, which required that if he lost any other match by pinfall, then he would be forced to retire. Hennig would avoid by winning his matches or losing via countout. On the November 15th episode of Nitro, Hennig took on Goldberg in a match which stipulated that if Hennig would be pinned, then he would retire, and if he won, then he would receive a new contract. Hennig lost via submission, meaning he wouldn't have to retire. On the November 18th episode of Thunder, Hennig cost Buff Bagwell a match against the Canadian crippler Chris Benoit, setting up a match between Bagwell and Curt Hennig at Mayhem. On the November 1st episode of Nitro, Vampiro defeated Berlin in the opening round. The following week, Berlin cost Vampiro. On the October 18th episode of Nitro, Jeff Jarrett returned to WCW and smashed Buff Bagwell over the head with his guitar. Later that night, Miss Elizabeth was found unconscious backstage with a guitar beside her, causing Lex Luger, the total package, to suspect Jarrett of having done the deed. On the November 1st episode of Nitro, Jarrett called out Luger and Elizabeth and demanded that they apologize to him for suspecting him of doing so. And then they suspected Meng of having done so, which caused Meng to come out. And then Luger and Elizabeth attacked Meng. Meng cost Luger his WCW World Championship Tournament quarterfinal match against Sting on November 15th. On the November 18th episode of Thunder, Liz apologized to Meng after his match with Vampiro to distract him enough for Luger to attack him with a chair and setting up a match between the two at Mayhem. So that brings us to the actual event itself. That brings us to WCW Mayhem. And if you want to know more about what was going through the mind of Jeff Jarrett, then you can do so by listening to My World with Jeff Jarrett, available on all main podcast platforms. So we're in Canada. We're in Toronto, Ontario, the first WCW pay-per-view to take place in Canada. And there is 13,839 people in attendance. So if we look at the results, Chris Benoit defeated Jeff Jarrett in 9 minutes 27 for the World Heavyweight Championship Tournament semi-final. Evan Courageous defeated Disco Inferno to win the WCW Cruiserweight title in 8 minutes and 28. Norman Smiley defeated Brian Knobbs in a hardcore match to become the first WCW hardcore champion in 7 minutes 27. The Revolution, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Asia defeated the Filthy Animals, Eddie Guerrero, Billy Kidman, and Tori Wilson in an intergender elimination tag match in just under 11 minutes. Buff Bagwell defeated Curt Hennig in 7 minutes 47 in a retirement match. The Hitman defeated Sting in the semi-final to the tournament in 9 minutes 27 by submission. Vampiro defeated Berlin by submission in a dog collar match in just under 5 minutes. Meng defeated the total package with Elizabeth by submission in 5 minutes 23. Scott Hall defeated Booker T to retain both the WCW US and World Television Championships in 6 minutes 4. David Flair fought Kimberly Page to a no contest in 4:55. Goldberg defeated Sid Vicious in 5:30 in an I Quit match. And the Hitman defeated Chris Benoit by submission in 17 minutes 44 to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. And this is the second time that Benoit and the Hitman had faced off in 1999, because earlier that year was the tribute match at Kemper Arena for the late, great Owen Hart. So Mayhem, as we said, drew 13,000 fans and a revenue of $313,000. The event received real negative reviews from the critics. Arnold Furious of 411 Mania gave the event a score of 4.5 out of 10, writing, "A show with a lot of potential, but both the good matches were riddled with interference. Vince Russo's booking style couldn't produce great matches. He didn't have the attention span to book it and assumed the crowd didn't have an interest in watching it." Kevin Pantoja penned the event, giving it only 3 out of 10, considering it a bad event. "A lot of late WCW is terrible," he says, "but this might have been the most frustrating show." Scott Keith stated the event had a really hot opener and a decent main event, but just nothing else to fill the 2.5 hours. And that was WCW Mayhem. It was scary to think that about 12, 18 months after this, WCW would no longer be in existence. Of course, WCW would become one with the World Wrestling Federation on an episode of Monday Night Raw. And that is when wrestling as we know it changed, and the alliance angle and the invasion angle, which we've been covering this year on Retro Chat, continued. Was this the last great WCW pay-per-view? Absolutely not. Does it stand? Absolutely not. Were there a couple of good matches? Yeah. Jarrett versus Chris Benoit was a masterclass. It was a great contest between two fantastic workers. The problem with the match was it was overbooked. Creative Control got involved. The guitar got involved. There was too much happening. Bret the Hitman Hart and Chris Benoit were always going to fall short of the match that they had in tribute to Owen Hart. What would you give it out of 10? Quite simply, about a 2. And the only reason it got a 2 is for those two matches that we talked about there and then. Nothing else on Mayhem really made it stand out. Now, what was interesting about Mayhem was not only was it a pay-per-view, it was going to be the beginning of a brand new brand for WCW. We already talked about the EA game. There was a CD soundtrack produced. And of course, there was the Mayhem pay-per-view itself. Was Vince Russo the right person to book WCW? Well, that's a question that many people have been asking for many a year. And the general consensus is no, bro, he wasn't. But was WCW too far gone by this point? Who knows? That's it for this week's edition of the Retro Chat podcast. We got more coming up throughout December. But until then, if you want to get in contact with me, you can do. Subscribe on Retro Chat on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch at Retro Chat Podcast. Tweet me at Retro Chat Pod, and listen to the main show on Spotify, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Until next time, my name is Andy Evans. I will see you all very soon for more Retro Chat goodness right here on the Retro Chat Podcast. See you soon.